Hey guys, tonight we slide quietly into the cobbled, crooked alleys of medieval Italy, where the air smells faintly of wood smoke, overripe figs, and pork. You're just in time for an unofficial midnight market one, where sausages are wrapped, not just in casings, but in rules, suspicion, and a whole lot of fennel. There's no neon, no noise, just torchlight flickering on walls, older than most countries. You duck your head beneath a low stone archway, and suddenly you're in a world where meat is politics, spice is scandal, and breaking a food law could cost you more than dinner. And yes, you probably won't survive this, not because of violence, but because the regulations are baffling, the punishments are confusing, and someone's always watching. And also, because that free sample might actually be illegal, OFFAL. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who else is trying to fall asleep to fermented sausage facts. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together that you arrive in Florence first. The year, let's say 1349. There's a certain stillness to the streets, that eerie quiet of a city between plagues and festivals. As you meander past shuttered homes and iron-braced taverns, you notice the small things chalk symbols by the doorways, a stray cat curled beside a bread oven, and a wrinkled sign posted in Latin with a sketch of a sausage. It reads, more or less, "Let it be known that no sausage shall be sold made from the meat of pigs' ears, spleens, or unknown parts, unless declared and inspected, and sold before vespers." You blink. Turns out, sausage regulation was serious business. In medieval Italy, particularly in cities like Florence, Bologna, and Siena, sausages were regulated with a precision you'd expect from banking ledgers or land disputes. Why? Because meat wasn't just food. It was fragile, expensive, and dangerously easy to fake. You pass by a stall where a vendor's quietly wrapping up lengths of dark, shiny salami in a cloth. He freezes when he sees you looking. "These aren't for sale," he mutters, then vanishes behind a door. That's when you realize the city's sausage laws were so elaborate, they turned butchers into law skirters and nighttime into black market. Prime time, selling unapproved meat blends after sundown? Illegal. Using day-old pork? Finable, including fillers like breadcrumbs or beans. Depends on the region. Historians still argue whether these rules were actually enforced daily or mostly, symbolic part of a larger performance of civic virtue. But one thing is certain, sausage was a food with reputational risk. If a butcher was caught passing off spoiled or suspect meat, they weren't just fined, they could be banned from the market, or worse, shamed publicly. You stroll past a second stall. This one is technically closed, but a boy about 10 years old sits beside a basket, watching you with the wary look of someone trained to run if a city inspector shows up. Nestled inside are sausage links wrapped in grape leaves, still warm. You look, but don't touch. You've heard the warnings. Buying unauthorized sausages isn't just a stomach risk, it's a political act. The church Chiming the hour breaks the quiet. A bell tolls from somewhere near the Duomo. It's late enough now that anything still sizzling is likely illegal. Sausage making had its windows literally. City laws often restricted meat processing to certain times of day, both to reduce smells and to limit how long raw pork could sit in the sun. You duck into a side alley and stumble onto a butcher's shop closed now, but the smell lingers. Garlic, lard, and something faintly metallic. In the morning, the inspector will come, and if the records don't match, if the number of sausages exceeds the amount of meat reported purchased, there will be trouble. Butchers were required to record meat weights daily on scrolls, and those scrolls were audited. Yes, we're still talking about sausages, to keep the peace. City councils published ordinances, many. Bologna, for example, had one of the most detailed meat regulation codes in medieval Europe. There were rules for sausage shape, weight, salt content, smoke duration, and even string color. Because if you're going to police pork, you might as well go all in. A soft footstep behind you. You turn, just a cat. Or was it? People say that in the worst years during shortages or festivals, some butchers got creative. There are rumors of goat meat masquerading as pork, of bread soaked in blood to stretch the weight, of ... rat tail. Hard to prove, though, because once it's minced and spiced and smoked, who can tell? You step around a pile of olive pits and head toward a quieter quarter of the city, where homes are wider, lamps are fewer, and the air carries less lard. One house stands out not because of its beauty, but because of its wall carving. A pig, tied and seasoned, lying beneath a scroll. A magistrate lives here. It's said that the wealthy didn't trust the street sausages, no matter how well spiced. They had their own servants make them under supervision, because nothing ruins a feast like a guest vomiting in front of the bishop. Still, rules were rules. And even noble kitchens had to follow city sausage codes, at least on paper. You pause. Beneath a fig tree, something squelches underfoot. You don't look down. Far away, a woman sings a lullaby to a crying child. Closer, a knife scrapes softly. Someone preparing breakfast, or prepping illicit links by candlelight. You turn back toward the heart of the city, careful not to trip on the uneven stones. Somewhere nearby, the scroll of sausage laws is nailed to a door, ignored by most, but watched carefully by a few. And so you walk on, the night pressing gently in, the smell of salt and smoke guiding you toward the next chapter in this sleepy, savory maze of medieval food rules. The morning drips slowly into the streets like honey. You stretch, blink against the gray Florentine dawn, and follow the lazy clang of a butcher's cleaver echoing from a courtyard nearby. Somewhere, a rooster forgets how to crow. Your boots click softly on stone as you wind toward the day's first spectacle. The sausage stand being set up under the shadow of a Romanesque bell tower, its bricks stained with centuries of market smoke. The butcher here, tall, grumbly, and always squinting, goes by Tommaso. Locals call him Il Naso because, well, the man can smell a spoiled loin from 3 stalls away. He's rubbing his hands with rosemary oil and inspecting today's wares. You stop at a respectable distance. It's not polite to hover too close to sausage this early. He lays out each link carefully. Some are fat and smooth, tied in neat rings, like meat jewelry. Others are longer, thinner, dried into shriveled brown ropes like forgotten socks. Every single one, Tommaso insists, is made from certified, regulation-approved pig parts. No spleens, no snouts, and definitely no mystery bits. But you've heard rumors that back in the early 1300s, sausage making was considered both an art and a legal hazard. The statutes were very clear in most city-states. If you wanted to make or sell sausages, you had to declare every single ingredient. And no, meat didn't count. You had to specify shoulder, belly, back fat, and so on. Anything else was either taxed, banned, or condemned by someone with an ink-stained ledger and very strong opinions, in Bologna's statutes from 1288. For example, there's a clause that flatly forbids mixing animal organs of uncertain name into sausages without city approval. One can only imagine the chaos that led to this rule. Did someone slice up an ox tongue and just toss it in? Were intestines being double used as both casing and filling? Historians still argue whether these sausage restrictions came from real food safety concerns or were mostly classist attempts to keep commoners from eating too richly. There's evidence that some rules were used to force lower-class vendors out of the market. After all, rich folks could afford the proper cuts, while poorer ones had to make do with offal and imagination. You watch Tommaso grind his meat by hand, turning a wooden crank with a rhythmic patience. The mixture drops into a stone bowl with a dull, plop minced pork, salt, fennel seeds. Always fennel, not because it's traditional, though it is, but because medieval people believed fennel helped ward off bad humors and digestive regret. You lean closer and inhale. It smells oddly sweet and grassy. Tommaso chuckles without looking up. Fennel keeps the flies and the friars away, he says. You're not sure what he means, but you nod anyway. He begins stuffing the mixture into intestines, twisting them expertly, like braiding hair. It's oddly calming to watch. The sausages go into a hanging rack, technically not to be sold until the inspector arrives. But you know how this goes. The sausage inspector is named Goffredo, and he's either late, drunk, or busy with the wool tax. So sausages get sold anyway, quietly, no shouting. No coins exchanged too visibly. One man approaches and hands Tommaso what looks like a loaf of stale bread. In exchange, a small wrapped sausage. Barter. Always safer than coin. You step aside and drift past another vendor, this one a woman selling pickled onions and vinegar wine. She mutters to you, "Don't buy from the man near the fountain." His sausages are gray. Gray is not a good sign. You make your way there anyway, curiosity getting the better of you. The man in question has dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that suggests he's either guilty or just very cold. His sausages do, indeed, look gray, not green-gray, not beige gray, just an uncanny, unsettling fog gray. He notices your stare, smoke-cured, he says quickly. Mountain style. You murmur something non-committal and shuffle away, gray sausages aside. You find yourself wondering, how could people tell what was safe to eat? Truth is, they often couldn't. So medieval Italians used a combination of superstition, local reputation, and civic guidelines. If a sausage had a funny sheen or smell, you avoided it. If a vendor was ever fined or exposed for using bad parts, word spread fast. And yes, there were actual food critics of a sort. Wandering monks who'd lecture on gluttony, housemaids with the latest gossip, and that one lady who insisted she could taste sin in the seasoning. You pause under a fig tree to rest. Overheard two elderly men argue about whether tripe is acceptable in winter sausages. One of them insists it is if soaked in brine for 7 days. The other just mutters, "My wife would rather eat straw." You laugh softly to yourself. Sleepy. Or not, the debate is oddly comforting. Just then, a city guard walks past. His armor clinks quietly, and his leather shoes are crusted with mud. He pauses briefly at a stall, sniffs the air, then walks on. No comment. He's not here for sausage crimes today. You imagine what the sausage court records must have looked like, parchments filled with accusations like mixed kidneys without license or sold expired links on a holy day. In Siena, there's one surviving document from 1316 where a butcher was fined for including mouse-cut pork. What that means exactly, historians disagree. Possibly scraps stolen by rodents. Possibly actual rodents. You hope it's the former. The sun is climbing now. More stalls open. The sleepy square begins to buzz. Makers haul out early focaccia. Milk peddlers argue about ladle size. Butchers, however, keep one eye on the street just in case the inspector does show up after all. You wander back toward Tommaso's stall. He's already sold out of his best links. A single stubby one hangs near the edge of the rack, like the runt of the litter. You point at it. 5 beans, he says. You offer 6. He smiles. It's warm in your hands, paper wrapped and faintly greasy. You don't bite it yet. You just carry it like a sleepy treasure, walking through sunlight that glints off cobblestones and settles in your bones. Somewhere in the distance, bells ring again, and the fennel, faint as breath, follows you into the next part of the story. You wander further into the city, sausage in hand, chewing slowly now. The fennel sings gently in your mouth, sweet and sharp, and the salt warms your tongue like a familiar tune. You don't know if this sausage was made legally, but frankly, you no longer care. The sun is out. The city smells like bread and horses. And somewhere, deeper in the maze of Florence, the sausage guilds are plotting another argument. Guilds, you've heard the word tossed around a lot by now, especially in taverns, where complaints about greedy guildmasters flow freer than wine. But today you're going to see it up close. You follow the sound of shouting into a small square where 2 stalls have set up too close together. One is painted a sunny yellow, the other a rusty red. Both are flanked by stout, aproned men, each wielding long knives and longer tempers. You duck behind a barrel and watch. "Your spices are mine," yells one butcher. "You stole my assistant last winter. replies the other. The yellow stall butcher raises a ladle like a weapon. A tense silence. Then someone coughs, and the crowd disperses, disappointed. No brawl today. Just sausage politics -again.c. In medieval Italy, sausage wasn't just food. It was identity. And that identity was protected viciously by guilds. Each guild had a charter, a crest, a hierarchy, and a nearly religious obsession with rules. The Butchers' Guild, known as the Arte dei Beccae, was among the most powerful. They didn't just regulate meat, they defined it. Want to sell sausages in Florence? Better belong to the right guild. Want to use foreign spices like cumin or cinnamon? That might fall under the apothecary's jurisdiction. Want to hang your sausages too far into the street? Now you're in conflict with the Weavers' Guild. Because, apparently, they had claimed to overhead space on market days. Historians still argue whether the guild system was designed for economic fairness or just a power grab dressed in aprons and Latin scrolls. Either way, it worked. For a while, you stroll through the guild quarter buildings, thick with carved signs, heraldic boars, and the occasional suspicious sausage silhouette. Inside one shop, a man polishes a cleaver that looks like it's seen. More politics than pork. Behind him, a wall of rules written in red ink. All sausages shall be prepared within daylight hours. Sausages must be inspected before public display. Guild members may not undercut fellow butchers by more than 1 denier per link. No sausages may contain foreign fats or wine of unknown origin. Dot you blank at that last one. Foreign fats? Apparently, yes. There was once a scandal in Siena involving imported goose fat believed to make sausages unnaturally glossy. A rival butcher accused the user of culinary fraud, and the ensuing trial lasted weeks. The fat was exonerated. The butcher was not that you step out into the sun again. It's warmer now. A breeze carries notes of oregano and pride. You hear someone muttering behind a curtain, an old man, dictating a new guild complaint, perhaps. Something about someone selling unauthorized garlic lengths during a wedding feast. The guilds didn't just control ingredients. They controlled who could make sausage, where they could make it, and how they displayed it. Even the knots used to tie the sausage casing could signify your shop's allegiance. A triple knot meant Beccae, a twisted loop, probably the Specae. The Spice Guild, a diagonal cut at the tip, pure rebellion. You sit on a stone bench watching a young apprentice sweep meat scraps into a wooden bucket. His tunic bears the guild symbol, a pig's head on a red field. He pauses, wipes his brow, and sneaks a bite of cured meat when his master isn't looking. It's a moment as old as labor itself. The boy sees you watching and grins. Want to see the back room? You nod, curious. The shop smells like brine and smoke and secrets. The back room is cool, lined with drying links and hanging herbs. There's a table with parchment scraps and one long list with names and numbers sausages. Owed, fines paid, inspections passed. He points to a barrel. That's where we keep the gray list. You raise an eyebrow. Vendors who cheat, he whispers, or use ... substitutes. You don't ask what that means. Back outside. The guildmaster himself is stepping down from a horse-drawn cart, trailed by scribes carrying scrolls. He looks like he hasn't smiled since the last pope died. He barks at his assistants. Something about fines. Something about spice weights. Something about a rogue fennel ring. A crowd gathers. No one wants to miss a guild scolding. It's better than theater. The master points at a vendor and reads from a scroll. You sold 30 sausages on Tuesday. You reported only 24. Where are the missing links? The vendor swallows. They were ... donations. For the poor. The crowd ooze in that dangerous, half-amused way that suggests this excuse has been used before. Did the poor sign for them? Asks the guildmaster. Deadpan ... silence ... another fine is scribbled. The guilds kept order, sort of, but they also created resentment. Smaller vendors, foreign traders, and women often excluded from membership found creative ways around the system. Some joined unofficial cooperatives. Others simply sold sausages at night, outside city walls. There were whispers of a shadow guild, the Compagnia del Salsix, or Company of the Sausage, made up of black market butchers and fennel smugglers. You chuckle at the thought of a secret society meeting in candlelight, swearing sausage oaths over garlic bread. Probably not real, probably. But maybe back in the square, the yellow stall butcher and the red stall butcher are now laughing together, sipping warm wine. Their rivalry, it seems, was performative, a drama for customers. Their actual enemy isn't each other. It's the guildmaster with his scrolls and the inspector with his sniffing spoon. You step into the shade, watching the day fade around the edges. The guilds will meet again tonight in a stone hall above the tannery. They'll argue about pricing. They'll propose a new nut standard. Someone will mention the gray sausages, and everyone will pretend they don't know who made them. And tomorrow, the sausage drama will begin again. The sun has dipped lower now, washing Florence in amber. You stroll past shuttered workshops and empty wine barrels, the city slipping into that hazy pause between work and worship. Lanterns flicker to life one by one. Somewhere a lute strikes, up a wandering melody, and nearby, someone's cooking onions illegally early for dinner prep, if you believe the more absurd culinary statutes. You're headed toward Bologna this time. Not far, just a shift in setting a new city, a new tone. The stone feels different beneath your boots. The arches here stretch taller, the buildings lean just a touch more forward, as if trying to hear what you're thinking. And tonight, you're thinking about raids, not the kind with swords. The kind with scrolls, you've just missed one. A hush still clings to the sausage stalls in Bologna's central market. You walk among crates of beans, garlands of garlic, baskets of figs, all abandoned. In a hurry. Several stalls are dark, their counters swept unnaturally clean. A few still have droplets of something red, not blood. Exactly, but maybe spiced brine. It seems someone's sausage display was a little too creative this morning. The Great Bologna. Crackdown, they're calling it. A dawn inspection of record-breaking drama. You find a bench beside a fountain and overhear a tired vendor recounting the tale to a friend. They came with 4 scrolls. He says, eyes wide. 4. Unrolled them in front of everyone. Listed every rule since 1263. I swear one scroll had a sketch of my grandmother's meatball recipe on it. Apparently, the inspectors had received a tip. Someone was selling sausages stuffed with pigeon meat, a major no-no, unless explicitly labeled, and even then, only on non-market days. The council took it seriously. They arrived at sunrise, parchment in hand, accompanied by 2 apprentice lawyers and a monk just for moral support. You close your eyes and imagine it. City guards in brown tunics with ink-stained fingers, unrolling brittle parchment while butchers squint and sweat and try not to fidget, measuring sausages with knotted twine, comparing spice ratios to recorded ledgers, peering inside sausage ends with little knives, like archaeologists digging for sins. One vendor apparently tried to argue his way out of the charge, claimed the pigeon was medicinal. For gout, they find him anyway. The pigeon sausage scandal isn't even the strangest on record. In 1327, a vendor was fined for using walnuts in his sausages during Lent, not because walnuts were meat, but because someone thought they sounded too decadent. Historians still argue whether this was genuine religious concern or just an excuse to find someone unpopular. Either way, the vendor spent 3 days banned from market and was forced to publicly explain why he thought nuts belonged in a fasting dish. Bologna's laws, like Florence's, were detailed. Exceptionally so. You stroll past the city archive, where pages still sleep under lock and wax seals. One surviving document outlines the acceptable ratios of fat to lean meat in pork sausages. No less than 65%, no more than 80%. Violators were required to offer free sausages to the city orphanage, presumably after fixing the ratio. Inside a nearby tavern, 2 men argue about whether bay leaves were permissible in sausages intended for export. One insists the leaves prevent spoilage. The other mutters that spices make people too ambitious. You sip watery wine and listen. The tavern's walls are dark with soot. Old sausages hang from rafters hardened into near fossils. One has a label, Festival '04. You don't ask which century. Behind the bar, a woman scrapes burnt sausage ends into a wooden bucket. She tells you offhandedly that in 1299 there was a sausage uprising. You raise an eyebrow. She nods. Solemnly, a sausage vendor female, by the way, which was already a bit scandalous, refused to pay the guild tithe for her festival stall. Claimed she'd already paid in kind. In sausage, the guild disagreed, so she gave away her sausages. All of them. For free. Hundreds of links handed out in defiance. The crowd cheered. The guild panicked. Local officials called it an assault on order, but council changed the rules by the following week, declaring that no meats may be gifted without written permit and city seal. You smile. A sausage revolution, brief, smoky, delicious. You step back outside into the square. The scent of cooked meats is softer now. Less sizzle, more echo. Vendors are winding down. A few apprentices MOP their counters with vinegar. The inspectors have vanished, back to their scrolls and ink pots. Perhaps preparing tomorrow's raid. You pass a boy with a chalkboard. Sign, sausage inspection ahead, turn back, oh, we're be tasted. He winks at you. It's a joke, probably. Or maybe not. Bologna takes its food very seriously. In fact, the Bolognese are famous for inventing layers of food law that would give even the Vatican pause. Some say there was once a separate council for tortellini disputes. But you're focused on sausage, because bologna wasn't just about rules, it was about performance. Everything here felt like it was being watched, measured, compared. The sausage laws were a reflection of the city's need to prove itself refined, safe, proper. Not like those spicy improvisers in the South or the salt-sprinkling anarchists. Up north, Dot and yet everyone still broke the rules, subtly, quietly, with just enough fennel to mask the sin. You pass a final stall on your way back toward the city gates. A young woman is selling sausage slices on fresh bread, whispering prices so softly you wonder if she's even speaking aloud. Her cart has no sign, no scale. Just one little sausage knife, worn from years of negotiation. You ask her what kind. Of meat it is, Dot, she smiles. Mostly legal. And you bite in, anyway, because in Bologna, as in all of medieval Italy, sausage wasn't just food. It was a compromise between law and appetite, pride and rebellion, scroll and skillet, Dot, and in the end, nobody could resist for long. You leave Bologna behind as the moon rises, low and yellow, like a slow-cooked yolk. The road dips and rolls under your boots, winding through olive groves and vineyards asleep in the dark. Somewhere an owl hoots, and the wind smells faintly of pepper and pine. You're headed toward a small hill town, a quiet place, one that glows faintly with candlelight and incense. Because tonight, sausage meets sin. You arrive just in time for vespers, slipping silently into the back of a tiny stone chapel, where the priest's voice echoes softly against the vaulted ceiling. You're not here for the sermon, not really. You're here for the after-sermon discussion, which, in this particular village, happens to involve salami. You wouldn't think sausages and sermons mix, but in medieval Italy, everything came with a theological opinion, especially food. This evening's topic, gluttony, and more specifically, whether indulgence in salted meat counted as a gateway sign. The priest raises a dried sausage link in one hand like it's Exhibit A in a trial, his brow furrowed with holy concern. He quotes St. Augustine, something about hunger for earthly pleasure, and then gestures to a row of villagers, all looking just a little too guilty. One man is actually holding a sausage in his lap. He tucks it under his cloak, but not fast enough. You try not to laugh. The thing is, sausage was morally complicated. On one hand, it was practical preserved meat for lean months. On the other hand, it was tasty, too tasty. And anything that brought too much earthly pleasure, suspicious, a temptation, a test. There were even documented debates among friars about whether certain meats sounded too pleasurable. One monk reportedly declared that sausage whispers in the pan like a serpent in Eden. That particular friar was later reassigned to a monastery with less access to pork. You follow a group of villagers out of the chapel and into a courtyard where baskets of chestnuts and bread sit waiting. There's no meat tonight, at least not publicly. It's Friday, and in most Italian towns of the era, Friday meant fasting. No meat, no dairy, no fun. But you catch the scent of something smokier beneath the bread crusts. Someone's cheating. Of course they are. Historians still argue whether strict food fasts were followed consistently or just selectively enforced, depending on how well-liked you were. Church records show fines levied against repeat offenders, sometimes a few coins, sometimes mandatory prayer sessions. One entry from 1351 notes a baker who paid his fine in loaves shaped like fish to mark the rule. He was forgiven, mostly because the loaves were excellent. You meander through the town's side streets, where stone walls lean close and laundry flaps like flags of surrender. At the corner of an alley, a trio of women are whispering. You pretend to look at a fig tree, but you're listening. They're putting sausage in the wedding stew, one murmurs, but it's Lent. The third just nods slowly, lips tight. Apparently someone's bending the rules for love. It's not uncommon. Marriage feasts were sacred, but also practical dowries negotiated, alliances made, reputations cemented. And what better way to show off your prosperity than with meat? Rich, oily, heavily spiced sausage. Even if it meant eternal damnation or a scolding from the bishop, you pass an open window. Inside, a child is being told a bedtime story. Something about a saint and a talking pig. You can't quite catch the plot, but the child laughs. You smile, then the unmistakable sound of sizzling. You peek through a cracked door and spot an iron pan over a flame. A man turns sausages with a fork, whistling a hymn under his breath. He sees you and shrugs. I'm old, he says. They can't scare me anymore. You nod respectfully. Sausage rules and religious guilt went hand in hand. In some regions, even thinking about meat during a fast was considered spiritually risky. One poor scribe was excommunicated not for eating pork, but for sketching sausages. In the margins of a psalm, of course, not every priest was so strict. In Venice, there's record of a friar who secretly kept a sausage under his floorboards for emergencies. He claimed it was medicine. Historians debate whether this was true or just a medieval equivalent of its for my allergies. You wander toward the edge of the village, past a crumbling stone wall tangled with ivy. Beyond it lies a tiny vineyard and a garden patch, and there, under a canopy of fig leaves, sits a statue, not of a saint, not of a noble dot of a pig. You approach, curious. A plaque at its base reads, "To the pigs who fed us even when we were unworthy." You stare for a moment. That single quotes honest, and medieval thinking. Pigs were complicated symbols. Filthy, yes, but also sacrificial, necessary, even holy in their own earthy way. Some farmers even named them after saints, just in case a little divine favor rubbed off. There's a record from Umbria of a sow named Santa Salsiche. She was famous for her miraculously spicy litter, probably apocryphal. Still, you sit beside the pig statue for a while. It's oddly peaceful here, quiet. The night is heavy with myrtle and smoke. Somewhere nearby, a family is definitely not fasting. You hear laughter. And chewing dot in a town like this, the line between sacred and savory blurs. The priest preaches temperance. The townsfolk add extra fennel when no one's looking. Scrolls say one thing, stomachs say another, and sausages, in their seasoned little way, hold the tension dot. You stretch your legs, yawn, and wander back into the village. The lanterns are dimmer now, the stones cool. The chapel doors shut tight. But beneath the silence, you know there are sausages hidden in hearths, buried in bread loaves, and folded into secret recipes passed down with a wink and a whisper. Because even in an age of saints and sermons, sin and salami were never far apart. The road carries you south now, through hills that roll like the folds of a great sleeping blanket. Cypress trees stand like silent sentries, and flocks of sheep drift through the landscape like clouds that forgot to float. By the time you reach the next town, small, sun-baked, and permanently arguing with itself, you're ready for a drink and maybe, just maybe, a conversation that doesn't end with a scroll of meat regulations. But no such luck. You step into a tavern, low-ceilinged and smoky, where the only things louder than the loot in the corner are the accusations flying across the room. He's using noble fat for peasant lynx. You're just jealous because my sausages don't taste like shoe leather, and yours taste like sin and taxes. Ah, yes, class warfare. But make it pork dot, you settle at a back table, keeping your head low and your ears open. What your hearing is more than bickering. This is the sound of sausages upsetting the entire social order. Because in medieval Italy, I got to eat what was serious business. Sausages, humble as they may seem now, were status symbols. Their contents, size, spice level, and even how they were tied all signaled class. A peasant sausage, coarsely ground, heavy on the breadcrumbs, dried in the chimney smoke next to the onions. A noble sausage, silky fine meat, laced with rare spices from Alexandria, hand-tied by someone named after a saint. This tavern, caught somewhere in the middle, was the front line. Historians still argue whether sausage became politicized, naturally, or was made so by design. What's certain is that as cities grew wealthier and trade expanded, sausages transformed from survival food to culinary billboard. And when that happens, people get twitchy dot. You watch the barkeep pour wine for a table of merchants. They're loud, flushed, and smug in that way people get when they know their sausages are tax-exempt. One of them brags about a shipment of cinnamon-soaked pork heading for a wedding feast. His companion scoffs. "You're mixing cinnamon into pig meat?" he asks. "Why not just burn the Bible while you're at it?" Touch the acute class tension in meat form wasn't always this flamboyant, but it had long roots. In some towns, guilds imposed ingredient restrictions, specifically to keep certain foods out of reach for the poor, not just out of snobbery, but out of fear. A well-fed lower class was a confident lower class, and confident peasants asked questions. Or worse, demand sausage equality. There's an old law from Modena stating that sausage containing saffron shall not be sold to those without property. Yes, saffron sausages were for landowners only. Imagine gatekeeping flavor. You lean back and listen as a man tells the tale of the meat riots of 1312. According to him, a group of apprentices tired of working long hours just to pack sausages they couldn't afford to eat staged a protest. They stole a cartload of high-end links and distributed them in the town square. For free, the guild was horrified. The bishop called it gluttony. The apprentices were fined a year's wages, but apparently none of them regretted it. Said it was the best breakfast of their lives. The man says with a grin, the tavern warms with laughter. You order a plate of olives and sit quietly. No sausage tonight, you're watching instead. Across the room, a woman is selling slices of something wrapped in grape leaves. The merchants ignore her. A farmhand buys one and bites in with reverence. Pig in time, she says, catching your glance. From my cousin's farm. Don't. Ask which cousin. You don't. You step outside to clear your head. The street is wide here, paved in uneven stone, with a view of vineyards sloping off into the dark. There's music coming from somewhere, a flute, maybe, and footsteps. A group of young men passes you, laughing too loudly. Drunk on wine and bravado, they're dressed in finery far beyond their age. Rich sons, most likely. One of them carries a sausage on a wooden stick like a flag. You catch a bit of their conversation. Father says I can't eat merchant sausage. It's common. So I told him, then you cook me one yourself. They disappear down an alley. The ridiculousness of it all strikes you. A society divided not just by wealth or language, but by pork. Still, there's something deeply human in the drama. Everyone wants flavor. Everyone wants to eat well. And everyone, no matter how pious or proud, gets a little weak at the smell of peppered meat sizzling in lard. You find your way back into town, weaving past sleeping dogs and shuttered stalls. An old man is sitting beside a stone column, carving something with a blunt knife. You pause. Making sausage stamps, he says without looking up. You blink. They press them into the casing. Leave a mark. Guild started it. Now everyone wants one, even the peasants. You watch as he finishes one, a little spiral sun with a pig at its center. He looks at you. Want one? You nod and he hands it over. A sun for luck and for taste. You tuck it into your pocket. The fire's gone out in the tavern hearth. People are leaving now, bellies full, grudges briefly soothed. The barkeep is wiping down tables with wine-damp cloth. As you walk away, you hear someone mutter, next they'll tax the smoke. And you wouldn't be surprised, because in medieval Italy, nothing, not even sausage, escaped the grip of hierarchy. And sometimes a link of pork did more to challenge the status quo than any sermon or scroll. By now, the rhythm of medieval life has settled into your bones. The clatter of wooden carts, the drone of distant church bells, the ever-present aroma of meat either cooking or hiding. You wake to soft bells tolling across terracotta rooftops. And today is Sunday, which means one thing. No sausages. Well. Technically, you stretch in a chilly guest room above a baker's shop, the air filled with flour dust and early morning prayers. Below you, townspeople are already bustling through the square men in tidy cloaks. Women in pressed veils, children still sticky from yesterday's fig paste. Everyone is on their best behavior, because today it's Sabbath Sausage Law Day. Sunday. Rules were no joke in medieval Italy. Cities like Lucca, Arezzo, and parts of Rome issued very specific ordinances about what could and couldn't be sold on holy days. And while clothes and candles often got a pass, meat, especially seasoned and fried, did not. Why? Because sausage was noisy. Sausage was indulgent. Sausage sizzled. And that sort of thing was considered inappropriate. You slip down into the street and catch the scent of something suspicious wafting through a half-open door. You pause. Listen. There it is again, a soft hiss, a pop, a gentle hiss crackle that could only be oil and meat getting acquainted in a very forbidden way. Glance up. A boy, maybe 10, stands watch by the doorway. He squints at you. Doesn't speak. You nod. He nods back. The code is clear. Keep walking. This is the Sunday sausage paradox. The rules are posted in every square: no meat prepared, sold, or consumed during the sacred hours of worship. But as with most laws, the more loudly they're proclaimed, the more cleverly they're dodged. Inside churches, sermons are being delivered on restraint, on stillness, on sacrifice. Outside churches, sausages are being sliced thin and slipped into bread loaves like secret letters. Hidden meat, hidden hunger. Historians still argue whether these Sunday food bans were based in genuine spiritual belief, or were just a clever way for the church to reinforce authority in daily life. Likely both. After all, the priest can't check everyone's chimney, but reminding you that God sees everything keeps things quieter. You pass a public notice board. Someone's posted a poem mocking the Sabbath sausage ban. It's crude, probably written after 3 too many tankards of wine, and it reads, "If Christ fed crowds with fish and bread, why not pork when prayers are said?" Beneath it, a second hand has scribbled, because he didn't have to clean the grease stains. You stifle a laugh. A woman with a basket bumps past you. From under the linen cover, you smell garlic and fennel, and something unmistakably cured. You raise an eyebrow. She says nothing, just walks faster. There was even a term for this kind of culinary discretion, mezza culpa, or half-guilt. As in, yes, I broke the rule, but I didn't flaunt it. And half-guilt in the medieval mind was often enough to excuse a full sin. Nobody complained. Still, some towns took things seriously. In Pisa, the city council once hired holy hour enforcers to wander streets during Sunday Mass and sniff chimneys. If they smelled sausage or meat of any kind, they knocked. Hard. In one record, a woman claimed she was burning lavender, not lard. The enforcers didn't believe her. She was fined 5 florins and 1 public apology, though she reportedly whispered it was worth it as she handed over the coin. You step into a bakery to warm your hands. The ovens are glowing, the shelves stacked with loaves shaped like doves and wreaths. The baker offers you a roll still steaming. You break it open. Inside, a single sliver of sausage, folded like a secret between the crumb. He shrugs. Baked. Yesterday, he says. Yesterday. Right. You buy 2. You find a spot in the plaza. to sit stone still warm from yesterday's sun. Around you, the town hums quietly. Families walk in clusters. No one is rushing. There's peace in the slowness, or at least the appearance of it. A group of young boys passes by playing at Inspector and Butcher. One kid wears a blanket like a judge's robe and carries a stick for a scroll. Another, the butcher, leads innocence while hiding. Sausages in a toy cart. No sausage on Sunday, shouts the inspector. But it's goat, not pork, wails the butcher. The judge frowns. Still sausage. They collapse into giggles, you smile. The culture seeps in young Dot, back at the church. The bells ring again. Mass is over. The shops begin to creak open. Officially, no meat is allowed until sundown. But you notice the fishmonger has already swapped his sign. It no longer reads holy catch. It now reads simply stuffed eel. A code, perhaps. You stroll through the market. No sausage visible, but plenty of sausage-adjacent goods. Dried herbs, garlic braids, bread. Rolls shaped conveniently like sausage holders. One stall even offers spiced chickpea rounds. You try one. It tastes like denial. A vendor whispers, "Come back at dusk." You nod, because while Sundays were meant for the soul, the stomach waited only so long. And as light fades, the rules softened. Some houses began cooking a little early, windows open, on purpose. As if to say, we're not flaunting. We're just preparing. The sizzle returns. Faint at first, then louder. You pass a man turning a sausage over glowing coals in his courtyard. He looks at you, shrugs. "It's nearly dark," he says. "It's barely past noon." You keep walking. As you pass under the town's arched gate. A group of nuns sing softly from a distant cloister. Their voices float on the air, clear, high, slow. And beneath their melody, just barely audible, sausage. Again, because, even on the holiest days, hunger has its own kind of devotion. Night has fallen again, and this time you're not in a city. You're in a village, one of those tightly clustered stone and wood communities where the wind is louder than the streets, and the only laws that really matter are the ones passed down. In whispers, you're here because someone said the word curse. You're following a story, a strange one. The kind that floats just outside the bounds of proper history and lands squarely in the world of local legend. It starts, as these stories often do, with a bad sausage. The village elder greets you from a crooked doorway. She's barefoot. Her hands are stained with something red, not blood, not wine, maybe beetroot, maybe magic. Her eyes are sharp enough to slice lardo. They say it's smoked wrong, she tells you, leading you past a crumbling fountain. Hung too long, got cursed. You nod slowly. You've heard rumors, sausages that made people dream strange things. Sausages that turned the meat green but not spoiled exactly. Sausages that whistled as they cooked. This one, though this was different. She tells you about the year it happened, 1344. The summer was too wet, the pigs too fat, the air thick with mold. A butcher young, ambitious, and far too proud-made. A batch of sausages that no one had asked for. He spiced them heavily, hung them near the cemetery for cool air, and sold them during a feast, a holy day. Within a week, 4 people were sick. A 5th claims she could hear the sausages whispering in the pantry. You raise an eyebrow. The elder nods. They said it sounded like bees or bells. Local healers tried everything. Mustard seed tea, garlic poultices, reading psalms backwards. Nothing worked. Eventually, the sausages were gathered up and burned in the square, and the butcher was banned from meat work for life. He moved to Naples and took up eel farming. Still, people say the sickness returned every year around the same date. Historians, of course, are skeptical. Mass hysteria, they write. Spoiled meat in poor weather. But villagers? Villagers. Remember. They remember the strange dreams, the long fevers, the child who barked like a dog for 3 days. And they remember the smell. You follow the elder to her back garden, where she lifts a cloth off a clay jar. Inside, sausage. Old, gray, dried to the consistency of driftwood. It's not cursed anymore, she says. Probably. You don't touch it. In the Middle Ages, it wasn't unusual to blame mysterious illnesses on food, especially food that was dark, pungent, and prepared in secret. Sausages ticked every box. They were preserved, sometimes poorly, spiced, sometimes aggressively, and made from bits people didn't really want to see outside a casing. Add a thunderstorm or a bad dream, and voila, your dinner becomes demonic. Head back into the village square. The moon is bright. The houses lean like eavesdroppers. And someone is frying something. Again, you follow your nose and find a man tending a small outdoor fire. His sausages are looped neatly over a pine branch. He's turning them slowly, whispering prayers. What are you saying? You ask Dot. He glances at you, just in case. Turns out in many towns there were informal rituals, little spells, almost that butchers or home cooks would say over their sausages. Not proper blessings, not quite, just precautions. One old recipe book includes a sausage preparation with a footnote. Do not speak ill of the dead while tying the casings, lest the meat sour in spirit. Another says, if the links twist backwards during drying, burn them and bury the seam. Ashes by running water. That one's underlined. You wander through the village, watching shadows lengthen as fires burn low. You pass a tiny chapel where someone has left a bundle of herbs, rosemary, bay, and sage on the doorstep. A ward against food curses? Or maybe just for flavor? You'll never know. There's an open courtyard nearby where a group of women are, gossiping in low tones. One of them is weaving string, red, thin, and looped. Sausage twine. Do you still bless them? Someone asks. Of course, says another, but only if they're for company. You drift on. One story keeps coming up. The Strangolato di Sant'Onofrio, the Strangled of St. Onufrius. A sausage said to have caused choking deaths in 3 separate towns across a decade. Always the same size. Always the same strange crosshatch pattern on its skin. One survivor claimed the sausage moved in my mouth before I bit it. Double quotes charming. Eventually, the sausage was outlawed. Not the ingredients, just the specific pattern. It was called the death twist. No one's quite sure who invented it, but it disappeared soon after the 3rd funeral. Of course. A modern historian might tell you it was just bad preparation. Too dry, too dense, a casing tied too tight. And locals, they don't make that pattern anymore. Just in case, you reach the edge of the village and find a small stone marker, a pig carved into it, this time upside down. Beneath it, faint Latin letters, cave lingua maledita. Beware the cursed tongue. You look back. The village is quiet now. No more fires. No more whispering. Even the cursed sausage has gone to bed. You sit beneath an olive tree and watch the stars breathe. Somewhere in the hills, an owl asks a question it doesn't want answered, and you think maybe it's not so strange that people feared their food. When you spend weeks raising a pig, when you clean and stuff its parts by hand, when you hang the meat in your home and pray it doesn't rot well, there's intimacy. And with intimacy comes risk. And when things go wrong, you reach for something beyond explanation. A curse, a spirit, a sausage with a mind of its own. You yawn. It's probably just mold. Probably. The morning air is cool, the kind of sharp that wakes you slowly and makes your bones whisper against each other. You leave the little village and follow a narrow dirt road back toward city life, toward rules, registers, and something called the pork police. Yes, that's a real thing. Well, sort of. Your feet find their way into Perugia, a city tucked into the hills with streets so steep they feel like vertical mazes. It's quieter than Florence, less theatrical than Bologna, but don't be fooled. The sausage rules here were just as meticulous, and they came with enforcers. You pause at a plaza where a pair of men in faded uniforms are examining a butcher's stall. One is taking notes with a quill the size of a parsnip. The other, he's sniffing sausages. Like, literally. Nose on the casing sniffing. Long, investigative inhales that would make a truffle pig proud. The butcher looks nervous. Too soft. The sniffer mutters. Smoked too quickly, the writer adds. Without looking up, the butcher tries to protest something about humidity, about the curing room being invaded by damp air from the baker next door. But the enforcers remain unmoved. A fine is scribbled. A string is clipped. You step back, quietly amused. You've just witnessed the medieval version of a food inspection, and it wasn't unusual. Most mid-sized Italian cities had some kind of meat regulation authority. Sometimes it was a member of the Butchers' Guild, sometimes a city official. Sometimes, if things were especially dramatic, it designated a saggiatore, or taster. Yes, imagine being paid to eat sausages all day to make sure they weren't hiding anything ... suspicious. It was a glamorous title, until you remembered that half the job was checking for rot, parasites, or improperly washed intestines. One taster reportedly carried a tiny silver spoon and a flask of wine vinegar to cleanse the shame between bites. You walk through Perugia's winding alleys, where open shop fronts spill over with linens, pottery, and the scent of drying meat. Not all sausage makers are under inspection today, but everyone's watching, because anyone could file a complaint. A rival, a customer, a jealous neighbor whose sausages didn't sell quite as fast. The pork police had no uniforms, but they had power. If your sausage failed inspection, it could be 1. Removed from sale. 2. Publicly denounced by town. Crier. 3. Burned. With witnesses. You enter a small courtyard and find a group of apprentices gathered around a long wooden table. They're practicing weighing sausages. Yes, weighing them down to the ounce. One holds a set of brass scales, adjusting tiny weights while another reads from a rule book. You peer over their shoulders. Salumi must not exceed the expected weight relative to raw product unless accompanied by an explanatory statement signed by the meat master. Meat master? One apprentice rolls his eyes. That's my uncle. Historians still argue whether these inspections were about genuine health concerns or just another revenue stream for the city. Each fine net more coins in the municipal chest. And some sausage laws were so nitpicky, so delightfully obscure that you wonder if enforcement was just a game of gotcha. In Siena, there was once a rule that sausages made during the winds from the west must be dried indoors. Why? No one really knows. Probably a bad batch once. Or maybe someone important sneezed. You slip into a shady archway and find a wall plastered with paper scraps announcements. Laws, fines. One reads, Notice of condemned sausages. On the 3rd of September, in the market of San Lorenzo, the vendor known as Maurizio sold lengths of insufficient dryness and inconsistent texture. The sausages did not pass the bend test. They shall be burned tomorrow, outside the grain gate. You read that again. The bend test? Apparently, sausages weren't just inspected by sight or smell. They were also physically tested. The bend test involved holding a cured sausage between 2 fingers and gently flexing it. If it cracked, bent too easily, or oozed, trouble. You imagine a circle of serious men in robes bending sausages like they're assessing bows before battle. Wander to the grain gate at the edge of town. A few charred scraps rest beneath a cooking pit. Maybe yesterday's condemned batch. A dog sniffs the ashes, unimpressed. Just beyond the pit, a small garden grows with oregano, sage, and rosemary, herbs often used to mask faint spoilage. Not illegal, exactly, but frowned upon if used excessively. There's even an ordinance in one town that reads, Herbs shall not be used in quantity that deceives the tongue. How very poetic. A young girl approaches the herb patch, snips a handful of rosemary, and scurries off. You follow her quietly through the alleys, past laundry lines and trickling fountains, until she stops at a wooden door. Inside, a woman is stuffing sausages. Not a shop, just a kitchen. No gilt seal. No parchment on the wall. You watch from the doorway. She's not supposed to be selling, whispers the girl, but hers are better. You nod. The underground sausage economy thrives where the inspectors don't walk, and everyone knows it. There's an old saying in these parts. For every sausage burned in public, 3 are eaten in private. You suspect it's an understatement. Back in town, the inspectors have moved on. The butcher from earlier is rearranging his links with theatrical innocence. He catches your eye and shrugs. Too soft, he says, but still delicious. He offers you one. You bite and dot, it's a little too chewy. Definitely not legal. Absolutely wonderful. And somewhere behind you, a scroll is being written, a fine is being inked, a sausage is being weighed dot, because in Perugia, as across Italy, pork may be plentiful, but law is never far behind. Dawn again. Another town, another market square slowly shaking off its sleep. The air smells like dust, dew, and anxiety, because today you're tracing the trail of the smugglers. Yes, sausage smugglers. You laugh under your breath, but it's no joke. In medieval Italy, sausage wasn't just a local delicacy, it was a guarded commodity. Cities had pride, reputations, and taxes to protect. So naturally, they passed laws preventing their prized sausages from being exported. And naturally, people ignored them. You're in Parma now, where the pork is pinker, the air heavier with cheese, and the city walls lined with guards who absolutely do not want you sneaking fennel-laced contraband across the border. You arrive just as the market's setting up. A sleepy-eyed porter lugs crates of garlic and salt. A cart rattles past filled with barrels that definitely don't contain sausage, no matter how delicious they smell. You drift toward the merchant quarter where whispers float like smoke. Wrapped in laundry, hidden under the flour, baked into the bread. Smugglers were clever. They had to be, because Parma's laws were explicit. No raw, cured, or smoked pork sausages could leave the city without a notarized certificate of origin, a payment of export duty, and if you can believe it, a taste test by an appointed council member. That last bit was rumored to be more about bribery than bureaucracy, but people found ways. You follow a man in a long cloak through a quiet alley. He knocks on a wooden door. A woman answers, carrying what looks like a laundry bundle. She hands it over. The man tips his cap and vanishes. 10 minutes later, he's on the road walking toward the next province with a basket of soap and cloth. The cloth is linen, the soap, sausage. Wrapped in lard and rosemary. Genius. Historians still argue whether the export bans were about protecting public health, maintaining city pride, or just economic control. Likely all three. Each city had its own sausage identity, its own. Spice blends, smoke levels, fat ratios. Exporting them meant risking plagiarism. Imagine your famous Piacenza garlic sausage being copied poorly by your enemies in Ferrara. You sit at a border tavern, the kind of place where travelers mix, with traders where eyes are always watching and hands are never empty. A man sits beside you, nervous. He's sweating, even though the morning is cool. His bag rests at his feet. What's in the bag? You ask casually. Bread, he says too quickly. You wait. And sausage, he admits. Whispering, you raise an eyebrow. They're for my sister's wedding, he explains. She lives in Modena. She wants Parma sausage. She needs it. He's not wrong. Parma sausage had a reputation. Densely packed, heavily salted, slow smoked with walnut shells. Rich and earthy, and apparently worth the risk of a border fine. You glance around the tavern. No guards. Not yet. The man offers you a taste. One slice. Thick, smoky. The kind of sausage that tastes like it's been aged next to an argument and blessed with a fistful of defiance. You chew slowly. Worth it. Later, as you walk the road toward Modena, you pass a patrol checkpoint. 2 guards in chainmail lazily check carts and satchels. Most pass without issue bread, cheese, wine skins. But one merchant isn't so lucky. A guard lifts a lid, pokes inside with a dagger, and pulls out a sausage link tied with the wrong kind of string. Not MODENESE dot. Not certified. From Parma? The guard asks. The merchant shrugs. I didn't ask where the pig grew up. Bad move. The sausages are confiscated. The merchant fined 2 florins. He grumbles, but not too loudly. Everyone knows worse has happened. In 1339, a trader caught smuggling sausages disguised as candle wax was exiled for a year and required to sponsor a public sausage feast as penance. Legend says it was the best party of the decade. You reach Modena's market by dusk. It's smaller than Parma's, but just as lively. And here's the twist. They've got their own sausages, proudly displayed, aggressively seasoned with pepper and lemon rind. Very un-Parma. Very local. A vendor catches you eyeing the links. Not like that salted trash from the West. She says. You nod diplomatically, because sausage nationalism is real. Even now, centuries later, each town still swears theirs is best. There are festivals, duels, family schisms. There's even an apocryphal tale of a wedding canceled because neither family would agree on which sausage to serve. But back in the 1300s, these regional rivalries had laws. One town's specialty was another's stolen recipe. And smuggling sausage across borders wasn't just commerce, it was culinary treason. You sit beneath a walnut tree and watch the sun dip. Behind you, a boy sells sausage slices from a hidden basket. He calls it bread topping to avoid trouble. You ask him where it's from. He grins. From wherever the wind is blowing. Smart. In your hand, the slice is still warm. You take a bite. Hints of garlic, a bite of citrus, and a texture that says, this has traveled under laundry. Smuggling wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just a sister wanting familiar food, a traveler bringing home flavors, a cook refusing to let borders dictate her seasoning. The rules were strict, the sausages flexible. And by moonlight, as the last crumbs fall from your hands, you wonder if any of those rules ever truly mattered, because taste, like mischief, always finds a way through. The night is quiet again, and this time you're in Ferrara, a city of soft walls and hard rules. You walk slowly beneath arches painted with saints, past windows flickering with candlelight. Somewhere a dog barks. Somewhere else someone is definitely roasting meat, illegally. But you're not here for sausages, not directly. You're here for the people behind them, specifically the ones you don't see in the scrolls and proclamations. The women and the link boys. Sounds like a folk duo. It's not. You duck into a covered passageway lit by a single oil lamp, where a woman is selling sausage slices out of a basket barely bigger than your head. She looks around constantly, like a cat in a thunderstorm. You ask, is it legal? She smirks. Not for me. You learn quickly. Guilds rarely allowed women to be full members. Some cities made exceptions for widows. Others didn't. Most laws were written by and for men, And while the rules didn't always forbid women from making sausages, they made it nearly impossible to do so openly. So women got creative. They cooked in alleys and back courtyards, in secret kitchens lit only by coals and luck. They sold through intermediaries young boys called link boys, originally candle bearers who guided people through dark streets. But in Ferrara and a few other cities, they doubled as sausage couriers. You follow one now, a quick-footed boy with soot on his face and a grin, like he's never not running late. He weaves through the market, slipping a small paper-wrapped bundle into the hands of an old man in exchange for a copper coin. No eye contact. No words. No trace dot, it's all part of the system. Historians still argue about the extent of women's roles in the medieval meat economy. Some say they were limited to domestic sausage making. Others insist they ran entire shadow industries. What we know, for sure, their names almost never show up in the official records, but their presence is everywhere. You step into a courtyard behind a tavern. A woman in her 40s is hanging sausages over a low fire. She's humming. Her apron is splattered. Her face is proud. These are mine, she tells you. No husband, no guild. Just hands and heat. You ask her how she sells them. Through my nephews, she says. And the midwife. She delivers more than babies. She offers you a slice. It's dense, earthy, laced with garlic and something sweet fig syrup, maybe. You take another. She tells you how she started. After her husband died, she had to choose between poverty or pork. She picked pork. It wasn't safe, but it was hers. You linger in the firelight as she hangs a new batch to smoke. The smoke curls upward like incense, thick and fragrant. It clings to the walls. It tells on her. But she doesn't seem worried. The guards know, she shrugs. They like my sausage. You wander back into town, following the trail of faint torchlight and leftover spice. You pass another link boy, this one barely 10, tugging a handcart, stacked with covered baskets. His eyes dart like minnows. He whispers to you, "Don't tell the fishmonger." Why? He's jealous. Apparently, the boy makes deliveries for 3 different women, all of whom make sausage, none of whom like each other. It's political, personal, petty, delicious. You sit by a public fountain and reflect. An official sausage records when. The laws are written, when the fines are issued, when the guilds hold their meetings, the names are all male. But behind the links, behind the pans and spice jars, so many hands are not dot. It's the midwives, the widows, the wives, the aunts and the girls and the neighbors. Some sell to feed their families, some for pride, some just because they make a better sausage than anyone else. There's even a legend, half-whispered, of a Ferraran woman who once disguised herself as a man to join the sausage guild. She passed for 6 years before being found out during a particularly intense spice debate. She wasn't fined. She was recruited, maybe not. You pass a public hall where the guild meets. Tonight it's quiet, but tomorrow they'll argue about sausage string again, about knot length and curing sheds. And none of them will mention the dozen women who sold sausages under their noses all week. You hear laughter from an open window. Inside, a group of women are rolling sausage meat in cabbage leaves, giggling like girls sneaking candy. One of them sees you watching and winks. "Don't worry," she calls. "These are vegetarian." Laughter erupts. You walk on, past sleeping dogs and moonlit streets, thinking of the lint boys, the runners, the secret cooks, the real sausage story. And as you pass a final corner, a flicker of movement, another delivery, another exchange. A zine, handoff as old as scarcity, as new as hunger. Because in Ferrara, as in so many places, sausage was made by those you didn't see, sold through those you didn't notice, and eaten by everyone, whether or not the guild approved. It's early evening when you arrive in Arezzo, and the shadows are long, stretching like sleepy limbs across the cobbled square. The market's quieted, but something's different in the air. People are gathered not to shop or sing, but to watch. You drift toward the noise, pulled like smoke toward fire. You reach the square just as a voice calls out, "Bring forth the accused." A hush falls. The crowd parts. And there, shoulders slumped but head high, stands a butcher in a blood-stained apron. Behind him, on a wooden cart, sit several sausage links, plump, pale, suspicious. Welcome to your first sausage trial. It's not metaphorical. Not this time. You take a spot near the front, careful not to step in the runoff from the fishmonger's stall. The judge arrives, a stern-faced man in a hat, large enough to cast shade on half the square. He carries a scroll and a spoon. The spoon is more important today. The charges? Selling sausages made from unapproved meats, and worse doing so on a feast day dedicated to Saint Benedict, patron of clean living and, unfortunately for this butcher, clean eating. The accused speaks with a calm voice and a trembling mustache. "It was veal," he insists. "Fatty, yes, but veal." A murmur spreads through the crowd. The inspector steps forward. He's the kind of man who looks like he enjoys sniffing things. He picks up one of the sausages and slices it with practiced disdain. A bite, a chew, a pause. "Too smooth," he declares. "That's not veal." The judge nods grimly. A second inspector tastes. He frowns. "There's something unfamiliar." He whispers something to the scribe. The crowd leans in. Historians still argue about the fairness of sausage trials. Were they really about safety, or about keeping the guilds in power? Maybe both. Because when people can't afford the guild's prices, they go to back-alley butchers. And when they do that, the guilds lose money and control. You hear someone whisper, "I heard he used donkey." No, goat, pigeon, cat. The last one gets a few gasps and a slap on the arm. The judge raises his spoon. "We will test the garlic." "Wait, what?" Apparently the amount and type of garlic used in the sausage is a regional marker. This sausage has northern garlic, sharp and yellow. The butcher is local. Suspicious. The implication, either he's importing ingredients, illegal, or he's copying another region's sausage, worse than treason. A third inspector steps forward with a bit of bread and cheese, a palate cleanser. Then he makes a final proclamation. The sausage is tainted. Not dangerous, just dishonest. The sentence: a public shaming, a 10-florin fine, and a week of community labor scrubbing the market fountain and cleaning up after the city's goats. And this seems almost cruel. He must personally eat one of his own condemned sausages. You watch as he takes the bite, chews, swallows, then shrugs. Tastes fine, he mutters. The crowd chuckles. Public sausage trials weren't always so gentle. In Venice, one butcher in 1314 was accused of mixing horse meat into his salami. He was tied to the dock with a string of sausages around his neck, then dunked in the canal 3 times. Not fatal, just humiliating dot in Naples, another was forced to walk through town wearing a sign that read, "I seasoned lies." You pass a scribal clerk recording today's events in a thick ledger. He's barely 20, already bored, and chewing something that's definitely sausage. You point. "Legal?" you ask. He winks. "My mother made it." The trial disperses. People return to their stalls, their gossip, their quiet, hungry lives. But the lesson lingers. Sausage wasn't just food, it was reputation. And messing with the formula meant messing with trust. You didn't just poison someone's stomach. You poisoned their belief in the butcher, the street, the market. That was the real crime. You drift down a side street, still thinking. You pass a boy scrubbing the steps outside a tavern. He sings a song with nonsense words, but you catch one verse. Salty the meat and sour the fate, if garlic lies and spices. Wait. You don't know if it's a nursery rhyme or a warning. You come upon another square where a different butcher is offering sausage samples with aggressive optimism. He shouts, "Certified by the guild." Every few minutes and flashes a wax seal like a badge. You try a bite. It's fine, safe, boring. The spice is all in the trial. Apparently, you pass an alley and find a chalk sketch of a sausage wearing a judge's hat. Underneath, someone scrawled, "Who judges the judge's meat?" Good question. The system wasn't always fair. If you were rich, connected, or part of the guild, you could bend the rules. If you were poor, unlucky, or just too bold with your rosemary, you might find yourself in the square with a spoon and a sentence. But people still took the risk, because sausage was money, flavor, pride, and nothing makes people take risks quite like food that tastes better than rules. You step onto the city wall, watching the hills roll away in the fading light. Somewhere behind you, the condemned butcher is sweeping the square. Somewhere else, someone's tying sausages with string they hope no one notices. And tomorrow, it'll all happen again. The scrolls will unroll. The spoons will rise, and justice flavored with garlic will be served. By the time you reach the city of Prato, the morning air is already thick with the unmistakable scent of overconfidence. Today is Festa di San Salum, the Feast of Saint Sausage, or something close to it. Officially, it's a festival honoring a local saint who once fed the poor with barley and broth. Unofficially, it's an excuse to eat everything not nailed down, drink until Latin becomes optional, and of course fight about fennel. You arrive just as the first stall opens. A red awning flaps in the breeze above baskets of meat, loaves of bread, jars of olives, and 27 different types of sausage. You count them. You're awake now. The crowd is already buzzing, old women pointing, kids sneaking samples, merchants offering festival discounts that are suspiciously close to regular prices. You wander past a family arguing about whether the sausage should be grilled, boiled, or simply left to the gods. Then comes the announcement. The Salsicha Sagra contest begins in 1 hour. You blink. That's right, an official tasting contest, judged by a panel of self-declared connoisseurs, local notaries, one bishop, and a man named Hero who claims to taste with his soul. You find a seat on the edge of the square and watch the preparations. Sausages are unwrapped, brushed with oil, and arranged on wooden platters with little sprigs of herbs like they're going to a royal banquet. The vendors are dressed in their best aprons, some of which appear to be embroidered. You spot one, with tiny dancing pigs. Then the crowd surges. The tasting begins. Each judge takes a bite, nods solemnly, whispers to the scribe. You hear words like bold, audacious, too enthusiastic, and emotionally confusing. At least one judge weeps, though it might just be the pepper. You try a few samples yourself, nothing illegal here, at least not officially, but the flavors are intense. One sausage tastes like it was made by someone in a bad mood with excellent knives. Another is sweet, almost floral. A third one burns like a confession you weren't ready to make. Then, somewhere behind you, a shout. It begins. Every year, apparently, someone breaks the rules. This time it's over fennel seeds. A vendor, tall, mustached, probably named Marco, accused another vendor, short, curly-haired, definitely also named Marco, of using his fennel blend. Thief, shouts tall Marco. Liar, yells short Marco. They hold up sausage lengths like swords, the crown parts. The bishop sighs. A city official appears with a scroll. He begins reading the official spice registry aloud. Yes, there's a spice registry. According to the record, tall Marco's blend contains wild fennel, anise, and dried orange peel. Short Marco's contains wild fennel, anise, and secret citrus. The citrus is in question. The crowd yells suggestions. Taste test it. Smell them side by side. Fight with them. The last one gets the most support. Eventually, the judges agree to a blind sniff test. The sausages are unwrapped and waved under the noses of the panel, who close their eyes like monks in prayer. A verdict. Different. Barely. Tall Marco storms off. Short Marco sells out of sausages within 10 minutes. That's the power of festival drama. Historians still argue whether these sausage contests were serious culinary traditions or just excuses for low-stakes chaos. There's a record of one festival in Lucca where a sausage cook-off turned into a riot. Someone used imported black pepper. Someone else accused them of sorcery. The priest was dragged into it. The town banned pepper for a month. Back in Prato, you spot a sign. Sausage amnesty stall. No questions, just flavor. You approach. The vendor is older, calm, and clearly over it. He sells small, perfectly seasoned sausages in silence. You ask what's in them. Don't know. Don't ask. Fair enough. You buy one. It tastes like peace. Like someone who's been cooking for 60 years and no longer has the energy to argue about citrus. By mid-afternoon, the festival has become pure noise. Kids are chasing each other with stringed sausages like nunchucks. A band plays something halfway, between a hymn and a drinking song. The bishop is eating discreetly behind a curtain, but trouble brews again. This time, pricing. One vendor's sausages are listed as festival exclusive and priced 5 times higher than anyone else's. He claims it's because they've been aged and wine-soaked. Barrels for 40 days. Another vendor scoffs. So has my uncle. That doesn't make him special. Arguments begin. Again. Soon. The city official is back, this time with a different scroll reglamento per I Presi de Salumi and Occasioni del Fest, the official price regulation for festival sausages. Yes, again, this was a real thing. There were maximum prices, minimum weights, and even a rule that stated no sausage could be advertised as miraculous without written testimony. Seriously, you step aside and sit beneath an awning. The crowd has split, those still arguing and those now too full to care. Children sleep with sausage juice on their faces. One man lies in the shade, mumbling softly, "Too much rosemary." You sip weak wine and smile. This isn't just a food event. It's an expression of identity, of pride, of defiant seasoning. Because even with all the rules, especially with all the rules, people will always push back. They'll blend an extra herb, sell 1 hour early, raise their prices just enough to spark envy, and occasionally they'll riot over fennel. As the sun lowers and the crowd thins, you hear music again. A slower song now, the kind you hum when your belly's full and your feet are tired. You walk through the emptying square, past sausage scraps, dropped bread, and one lonely hat shaped like a pig. This was a feast, a fiasco, a fennel-scented act of rebellion. And tomorrow the fines will be tallied. The judges will write their notes, and someone somewhere will swear their sausage was robbed of victory. You've walked through sausage squares and trials, smuggling rings, and sermon-soaked kitchens. You've seen garlic debates bring grown men to tears and fines handed out over rogue pepper use. Now you find yourself beneath an olive tree in the outskirts of Florence again, shoes dusty, mind spinning from spice and scrolls. It's a good time to rest. Around you, cicadas buzz lazily. The afternoon sun lays gold across the grass. Beside you sits a traveling scholar, white robes, ink-stained fingers, a beard full of breadcrumbs. You didn't invite him to sit down. He just arrived, as scholars do. He offers you a fig. You accept. Then he sighs loudly, the kind of sigh that demands attention. "So," he says, "do you think the sausage laws were real?" You blink. They felt real. "Ah," he says, "but did they matter?" You've wandered into the long-standing, low-stakes academic brawl over sausage legislation in medieval Italy. Scholars are still debating the point centuries later. Were these rules rigorously enforced systems of food safety, or just an elaborate form of performative governance? The man beside you begins to explain, slowly, thoughtfully, with that particular passion scholars reserve for arguing over things that smell faintly of parchment and cooked meat. On one side, he says you have the records, the ordinances, the scrolls, the fines, clear signs that cities tried to regulate sausage. Not just what went into it, but when it could be sold, how it was displayed, even who could touch it. You nod, That checks out. You've seen the bend tests, the spoon trials, the public shame. But he continues, you also have the overwhelming evidence of everybody breaking those laws constantly. He's not wrong. From hidden courtyards to midnight markets, sausage making seemed to operate in that hazy space between rule and ritual where everyone knew the law, but nobody really obeyed it unless someone important was watching. And that, the scholar says, brushing crumbs from his robe, is why I say the rules weren't about control. They were about performance. You raise an eyebrow. Performance? He leans in. Think of it. The city posts its laws. The guilds enforce them publicly. The markets comply visibly. It's theater, a sausage-shaped show of order. But underneath, chaos, creativity, rebellion. That's where the real flavor was. You chew your fig and think. He pulls a scroll from his satchel and unrolls it with flair. It's covered in handwritten notes, diagrams of sausage casings, and at least one crude drawing of a sausage arguing with a bishop. See this? He points. Florence 1326. Ordinance states no sausage. May include more than 12% fat unless it's smoked over cherry wood. But the same year, the records show 81 fines issued to butchers whose sausages were suspiciously juicy. You chuckle? Meaning? Meaning. Everyone knew they were breaking the law. They just didn't care until they got caught. Then they'd pay the fine, maybe clean a square, and be right back at it by Tuesday. You ask, so why have the laws at all? He smiles, because without them, the game isn't as fun. Historians love this sort of thing. One group argues that the laws were vital for public health, especially during plague years when spoiled meat could mean death. Another insists the laws were just tax schemes dressed in Latin. And then there's the fringe camp, your new friend included, who believe sausage laws were more symbolic than practical. A way to tell the world, we are a city of order. Even our meat obeys. You lie back in the grass, letting the words drift. Maybe he's right. Maybe the Bend tests, the fennel riots, the smuggled links, maybe they weren't signs of failure, but of a system that worked precisely because it was always bending dot, because when laws are just strict enough to challenge, people stay engaged. They participate. They argue. They create dot, and occasionally they revolt over sausage. Besides, the scholar says, if everyone had followed the rules, you wouldn't have had half as much fun. You smirk. He's got you there. You think back to the widow who cooked. In secret, the boy who ran sausage bundles like sacred scrolls, the gray market butcher who claimed his sausages were mostly legal. None of them were fully inside the law, but all of them were very much inside the culture. In fact, sausage in medieval Italy may have been the most democratic thing going. It crossed class lines, defied officials, laughed in the face of holy fasting, and when the scrolls came out, the sausages kept sizzling. Your scholarly companion stands and brushes off his robe. I'm off, he says, meeting some monks to argue about fish sauce tariffs. You wave him off. The sun has dipped lower now, and the olive tree's shadow has stretched across your feet. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks lazily. Somewhere not nearby, A butcher is probably stuffing something he shouldn't into a casing and calling it a family recipe. You smile, Dot, because in the end, maybe the laws weren't the point. Maybe it was the conversation, the negotiation, the delicious little rebellion baked into every bite. You rise slowly from beneath the olive tree, joints creaking, cloak brushing against the earth. The road ahead curls gently downhill toward the coast, where markets once filled with salt and anchovies now occasionally smell of garlic and hope. Your feet are light. Your stomach, not so much. You're heading to Genoa, the last stop on this sausage-laced pilgrimage. The city greets you with gulls, fog, and the sound of wooden hulls rocking in the harbor. Genoa isn't a place of scrolls and saints like Florence. It's saltier, wetter, a place where ships bring spices faster than ordinances can name them, and where sausage rules still exist technically, but are met with raised eyebrows and shrugged shoulders. This is where it all breaks down. You step into a dockside market where fishermen barter with wine and sausage hangs beside drying nets. The links here are coarser, denser, speckled with herbs you can't quite identify and fat that glistens like polished marble. Nobody here is checking spice ratios. No one is holding up strings for bend tests. It's all very relaxed, Dot, and yet the flavor is excellent. You bite into a sample offered by a woman with a knife tucked in her belt, and a laugh that sounds like it could command storms. The sausage is spicy, smoky, a little wild. She grins. Family recipe from Corsica. Illegal? Probably. Does it matter? Not anymore. The further you get from the strict city center's Florence. Bologna, Siena, the looser the grip of law becomes. And Genoa, with its ships and its swagger, may be the most lawless of all. Here, sausage isn't regulated. It's traded. It flows between boats and back rooms and borderless palates. Genoese sausage might have Turkish cumin, North African coriander, or Greek lemon zest, and no one's getting fined for it. You ask someone, weren't there rules? He shrugs. Rules sink. Sausages float. Somehow, that makes perfect sense. Historians still argue whether Genoa ever had the same obsession with sausage codes as its inland neighbors. There are writ cards, yes, laws about weights and meat types, but enforcement seems to have been more casual. One document from the 1400s refers to the Advisory on Acceptable Sausage Length, which sounds more like a suggestion than a statute. You pass a tavern where sailors sing about sausage like it's a woman they miss, a war they survived, and a debt they never intend to pay. One verse ends, the priest may preach, the scribe may note, but I'll eat links until I float. Inside, a plate of sliced sausage sits untouched until the song ends. Then it vanishes. You sit at the bar and talk to the barkeep, a weathered man with arms like anchor rope and a permanent layer of grease on his hands. He tells you about his grandmother who sold sausage on the sly during Lent by calling it stuffed fish. The trick? She wrapped it in seaweed. Everyone knew. No one cared. They came for the sausage, he says. Not the explanation. It's the same story again and again. People ignoring rules, bending rules, pretending the rules were different last week. Because ultimately, all the laws and fines and scrolls couldn't erase one simple truth. People loved sausages, not just for their taste, but for what they represented. A way to hold on to flavor when meat was scarce. A way to hide mistakes and call them innovation. A way to make something personal, something secret, something theirs. You walk back toward the docks as the sky darkens. The market is closing. The vendors pack their spices, wipe their knives, and slip their sausage hooks into canvas rolls like prized tools. One man walks past you carrying a box stamped with 5 different city seals. Florence, Siena, Lucca, Pisa, Genoa. You ask him, "What's in the box?" He winks. A sausage nobody can arrest. You don't ask more, because you know in the end every rule was written with a quill. But sausages? Sausages were written with hunger, joy, and a deep, irrepressible defiance. There were scrolls, sure, but there were also secret recipes passed in flour-dusted whispers. Trials, yes, but also songs, fines, but feasts. And through it all, despite the threats of shame and spoilage and saffron taxation, one thing remained constant. People still ate them anyway, still do and every time they do, whether it's wrapped in fig leaves or foil, smoked or boiled, legal or questionably inspired, they taste that same old rebellion, still warm from the fire, because some cravings are stronger than law, some flavors outlast scrolls, and some stories like the one you've just walked through keep sizzling, century after century, link after link, across tables, borders, and generations. Now, as the night deepens and the fires die down, let yourself drift back away from the bustling markets and courtroom spoons, away from the scent of garlic on old stone, the crackle of sausage skins beneath judicial gazes. The cities fade, the scrolls close, and you're left only with the quiet hum of memory, of warm kitchens behind shuttered windows, of fennel-scented secrets passed hand to hand, heart to heart, of laughter bubbling up between laws, of hands brown, wrinkled, flour-covered, needing something just for you. Feel the cobbles soften beneath your feet. The noise quiets. The shadows lengthen. Even the most chaotic flavors eventually settle. Even the loudest rules become background murmured. And now you're just you, wrapped in warmth, held softly in that space where stories linger and sleep arrives. You've walked a long road. You've tasted old arguments, sliced through centuries of stubborn spice and whispered defiance. Now there's nothing left to chase. No more trials. No more fines. Just the slow exhale of the world as it curls inward. Just the comfort of knowing that even in the strictest, strangest corners of history, someone was always standing by a fire, quietly making something wonderful. For themselves, for someone they loved, maybe for you. So close your eyes, let it go. Let it all simmer down to silence. And sleep.